Hi everyone, welcome back to DGMZ, Diwan-e-Ghalib, Meri Zubani. To all our returning viewers, we are very happy you could join us again. And to the new viewers, we are delighted you discovered the podcast and decided to tune in for the first time. Now, if you were with me in the previous episode, you know that currently we are going through Ghazal 37 from Divan-e-Ghalib. We've already covered 9 couplets. Today we are going to pick the 10th couplet. As always, I'm going to read the couplet first, a quick approximate translation, some keywords, and finally the DGMZ impression of the couplet. So, allow me to narrate for you couplet 10 from Ghazal 37 from Diwan-e-Ghalib. पकड़े जाते हैं फरिश्तों के लिखे पर ना-हक। पकड़े जाते हैं फरिश्तों के लिखे पर ना-हक। आदमी कोई हमारा दम-ए-तहरीर भी था। Let's do a quick translation. First line. पकड़े जाते हैं फरिश्तों के लिखे पर ना-हक. We are seized unjustly based on the writings of the angels. Second line. आदमी कोई हमारा दम-ए-तहरीर भी था. Was there even a person from our side at the time of these writings? Ghalib in this Sher ushers us into the world of the angels and makes it sound simple. The angels wrote something. On the strength of that writing, Ghalib is caught. And he objects. He questions. But before we get into all that, we should meet the people he is objecting to. Because tucked quietly inside the first line is an entire world. The world of angels. We say the word angels so easily, as though naming them is the same as knowing them. But behind that one familiar word lies an unseen creation, vast, ordered, inhabited, alive with purpose. Beings we do not see, duties we do not witness, a world carrying on beside ours, whether we are aware of it or not. And Ghalib, with characteristic ease, reaches into that unseen world and summons its inhabitants into today's Sher. Who are these beings? What kind of a world do they belong to? What happens there? And why, among the immense host, do some of them enter so intimately into the story of a human life? So, before we decide whether Mirza has been treated unfairly or not, we should spend a little time with the ones he holds responsible for it. So, let's step across a boundary we normally cannot see into the world of angels. There is the world we know because we can see it. A room, a road, a tree moving in the wind, a face across the table, our own hands resting before us. We move through this world with the easy confidence of people who believe they know what surrounds them. And yet, the visible world is only one part of existence. Alongside it lies another realm. In Islamic theology, it is known as Al-Ghaib, the unseen, not necessarily somewhere far away, not necessarily beyond some distant horizon, simply beyond the reach of ordinary human sight. And among the beings who belong to this unseen order are the Malaika, the angels. Islamic tradition describes them as beings created from light. They belong to an order very different from ours. They do not eat, they do not drink, they do not tire, they do not sleep. They carry out the commands entrusted to them. Their existence is not imagined as idle. It is filled with purpose. And they are not few. In fact, when Islamic tradition tries to convey their number, it reaches for images so vast that counting almost becomes meaningless. There is this extraordinary image of Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur, the much frequented house, a heavenly sanctuary said to be visited every day by 70,000 angels. They enter, they worship, they leave, and those same 70,000 never return again. The next day, another 70,000, and the next, another 70,000. A procession stretching beyond anything the human imagination can comfortably count. Another tradition gives us an even stranger image. The heavens themselves seem almost crowded with worship. Scarcely a space of 4 fingers without an angel there. So perhaps we should not try to quantify them. We should simply imagine the scale. An unseen universe alive with presence. Imagine for a moment that we could step across this boundary, beyond the world we see, into that immeasurable company of light. What would we find? Not a single order of identical beings performing a single celestial task, but we would find purpose everywhere. In the Islamic tradition, angels are entrusted with different responsibilities. Some of these responsibilities touch the largest movements of existence itself. Jibreel is associated with revelation, the angel entrusted with carrying the divine message to the prophets, words traveling from the unseen into human history. Mikael is associated with rain and sustenance, with the nourishment through which the earth continues to live. Clouds gather, rain falls, a dry field turns green, and somewhere behind the visible event lies an unseen order. Then there is Israfil, associated with the trumpet. For almost the whole span of human existence, the trumpet belongs to the future, silent, watching until the moment when it will announce that one world has reached its end and another is about to begin. And then there is the angel of death, entrusted with perhaps the most intimate threshold of all, the moment when a human life leaves the body that carried it. But the angelic world does not concern itself only with beginnings and endings. There are angels associated with protection, angels connected with the grave, angels associated with paradise, and angels associated with hell. Angels whose existence seems tied to worship itself. Different responsibilities, different moments, different thresholds. A universe in which the unseen is not without order and the invisible is not without activity. And somewhere within this extraordinary distribution of responsibilities lies one assignment that seems at first almost modest beside the others. No revelation descending from heaven, no rain falling over the earth, no trumpet announcing the end of time, no soul crossing the boundary of death. Instead, an ordinary person wakes in the morning. Perhaps they wash, they drink tea, they hurry out of the house. They speak, they listen, they work, they laugh. They become irritated, they help someone, they hurt someone. Then they say something they immediately wish they could take back. Nothing cosmic appears to have happened in this human life. No heavens have opened, no trumpets have sounded. It is simply a day, a normal day in a human's life. One human day among billions of human days. And yet, Islamic tradition places beside this ordinary life an extraordinary, unseen companionship. Among that immeasurable host of angels, there is a pair of angels with an assignment that is in close proximity to humans. So close, in fact, that tradition places them at either side of us. One to the right, one to the left. Wherever this human life goes, they go with it. One to the right, one to the left. And now the immense world of angels suddenly narrows into these two. They are commonly known as the Kiraman Katibin. And I might be pronouncing that incorrectly. I apologize for that. Kiraman Katibin. The noble scribes, the honored recorders. Their responsibility is not a kingdom, not the rain, not revelation, not even passage between life and death. Their responsibility is something astonishing. The record of a human life. The Quran speaks of keepers appointed over us, noble and recording, who know what we do. Elsewhere, it gives us an image of two receivers, one seated on the right, the other on the left. And then comes an extraordinary line. A human being does not utter a word without an observer nearby. Ready. The word matters. Ready. Not arriving afterwards, not being summoned once something important has happened. Already there, already present, already prepared. This is where an interesting confusion has entered popular narratives. Many of us may have heard these two angels called Raqib and Atid, as though these were simply their individual names. But the language is more intriguing than that. The Quranic expression is Raqiban Atid. Raqib carries the sense of one who watches, an observer, a vigilant presence. And Atid carries the sense of being ready, prepared, ever present. So rather than introducing two celestial characters by name, the words may be describing the very condition of the reorder. Watchful, ready. Islamic sources do not securely give us personal names for these two angels. What they give us far more clearly is their office, their function, their title. Kiraman Katibin, the noble scribes. And perhaps that makes the image even more powerful. Because the story is not really asking us to imagine their personalities. We are not told which one is stern, which one is gentle, whether one speaks more than the other, whether they resemble one another, do their wings look the same, whether they have expressions we would recognize. Those details belong largely to human imagination. What matters is what they are here to do, to witness and to write. Now, imagine the extraordinary nature of that. A human life does not need to become historically important to enter their record. You do not need to become a king, a saint, a criminal, a poet. You need only to live. Morning arrives, you wake, and the record continues. You leave your home, the record continues. You speak to someone you love, the record continues. You pass a stranger, you make a promise, you break a promise, you offer kindness when nobody is watching. You wound someone with a sentence that takes only 3 seconds to say and years to heal. You apologize, or perhaps you do not. The world moves on almost immediately. But beside this visible life, the unseen record continues. And the tradition gives this invisible companionship a remarkable geography. Not somewhere above you, not somewhere in a distant heaven, closer. One recorder associated with your right, one with your left. Two sides of the same human being, two sides of the same unfolding life. And between them, you. One to the right, one to the left. It is perhaps the most enduring image associated with the noble scribes. Two unseen recorders, one human life between them. And each side carries a different responsibility. The angel associated with the right records the good. The angel associated with the left records wrongdoing. At first, the arrangement sounds almost beautifully simple. Right, left, good, bad. Two sides, two records. But human life, of course, is rarely that tidy. Because what exactly constitutes a deed is a very important question. Is it only something done with the hands? Something spoken aloud? Something intended? Something almost done but abandoned? Something we wanted to do but could not? Something terrible that crossed the mind but never became action? And when you comprehend all those questions, suddenly the image of two angels on either side of a human being becomes something far more interesting than a childhood picture of celestial accountants. Because Islamic tradition does not imagine goodness and wrongdoing as perfectly symmetrical things. Consider a good intention. A person intends to do something good. Perhaps circumstances prevent it. The act never happens. And yet, traditions in our sources describe the intention toward good itself as capable of entering the record as goodness. If the person then carries out that good deed, its reward is multiplied. Now turn the situation around. A harmful thought appears, an impulse, anger, jealousy, temptation. Something ugly passes through the mind. but the person does not act upon it. Here, the tradition becomes more merciful than the simple image of constant surveillance might suggest. A passing evil intention is not treated in the same way as an evil deed actually committed. The thought may come and go without becoming the act. So the record is not merely a transcription of everything that passes through consciousness. There is a distinction between thought and deed, between intention and action, between wanting to do good and being unable to complete it, and wanting to do wrong but choosing not to. And this gives the two sides of the human being a curious moral asymmetry. Goodness seems almost eager to enter the book. A good intention can matter. A completed good deed can grow in value. But what about wrongdoing? Wrongdoing encounters something unexpected. A hesitation, a space, a possibility that the story may not yet be finished. Because, according to sources available, when a person commits a wrong, the angel on the left does not necessarily lower the pen immediately. Imagine that moment. The act has happened. The person knows it. The recorder knows it. The page is there. The pen is ready. Everything required for the entry exists. And yet, the pen waits. The pen waits. Why? Because the human being may still turn back. They may regret. They may seek forgiveness. They may repent. Different renditions describe the duration of this delay differently. So perhaps the number of hours is not the most important part of this image. The important part is the pause, the extraordinary interval between what has been done and what may finally be written. For suddenly, the noble scribes are not merely giving us an image of accountability. The image contains something else. Mercy. A wrong action does not make time stop. A person who committed it is still capable of becoming the person who regrets it. And somewhere between these two versions of the same human being, the one who acted and the one who may yet repent, the pen remains suspended. For a moment, the entire unseen machinery of recording seems to hold its breath. A deed has happened. A page is waiting. A pen is poised, but the ink has not touched the paper yet. Now, with the pen poised, the page waiting, we have arrived at the heart of the noble scribe's extraordinary responsibility. Writing. Think about how strange that idea really is. Human life is made of moments. Most of them disappear almost as soon as they happen. A sentence is spoken and the air that carried it falls silent. A door is held open for someone and a few seconds later both people have walked away. A harsh word escapes in anger. The argument ends. The room becomes quiet again. A coin passes from one hand to another. A promise is made, a promise is forgotten. Someone offers help, someone turns away. Someone forgives, someone refuses. The moment arrives, exists, and then vanishes. This is how we experience life. As something continuously disappearing behind us. But the image of the noble scribes asks us to imagine something very different. What disappears from the moment does not necessarily disappear from the record. The Quranic image is strikingly attentive even to speech. A person does not utter a word without an observer nearby ready. A word may take only a second to say, but once spoken, it has entered the moral life of the person who spoke it. And so, imagine the two records continuing beside an ordinary day. Not only during its dramatic moments, but during its smallest ones. Breakfast, conversation, disagreement, journey to work, transaction, kindness, cruelty, private act, public gesture, something given, something taken, something withheld, something repaired, something damaged. And slowly, almost invisibly, a day is becoming a writing. Then another day, and another, and another. Pages accumulate. Years pass. The child becomes an adult. The adult grows older. Places change. People enter life. People leave it. Things that once seemed unforgettable become difficult even to remember. And this is where the image of the record becomes almost unsettling in its intimacy. Because human memory is selective, right? We remember some things vividly, we soften others, we rearrange them, we justify, we forget, sometimes genuinely, sometimes conveniently. The noble scribes, however, are not being imagined as writing an autobiography. They are not recording the story as we later tell it to ourselves. Their record accompanies the life while the life is actually being lived. Moment beside moment, deed beside deed, word beside word. The human being moves forward while the pages gather behind. And perhaps that is why the image of writing is so powerful. Because writing gives permanence to what would otherwise disappear. The spoken word vanishes from the room, the written word remains. The action passes, the record remains. The day ends, the page remains. And eventually, what began as isolated marks, a word here, a deed there, a kindness, a failure, a repentance, a choice, all begin to resemble something larger. Not simply a collection of entries, not merely a ledger, but the accumulated moral trace of an entire existence. A life written alongside the living of it, page after page, day after day, until eventually there comes a moment when no new day is added, no new sentence is spoken, no new deed enters either side. The pen that accompanied an entire human lifetime finally becomes still. And somewhere in the unseen, what remains is something no human being could ever have written from memory alone. The book of a life. Written quietly, written continuously, written while the person whose life it contains is busy doing something else entirely. For years, the record remains unseen. The human being lives forward. The pages gather behind. And then, Islamic tradition carries this image beyond life itself. Because the record is not imagined as something written merely to be stored away. There comes a time when the book that accompanied the human being returns to the human being. The Quran gives us a startling image, a record brought forth, a book encountered, and the human being is told, in effect, read your book. Imagine that moment. For an entire lifetime, two unseen recorders have known the contents of these pages. Now, the person whose life created them sees the record too. And perhaps the strangest thing about such a book would not be what we remember. It would be what we have forgotten. The conversation from 20 years ago, the casual kindness we never thought important, the sentence that wounded someone more deeply than we knew, the moment we could have helped and did not, the wrong we regretted, the wrong we justified, the good deed nobody applauded, the temptation resisted in complete privacy, the apology, the forgiveness, the silence, the choice, tiny things, enormous things, things that changed lives, things that seemed to change nothing at all of them that once belonged to passing time now belong to the book. And the Quran presents the record as astonishingly complete. Nothing insignificant enough to escape it, nothing great enough to overwhelm it. The person looks at the accumulated record and discovers that the scattered moments of an existence have been gathered together. What felt like thousands upon thousands of unrelated days have become one account. And suddenly, those two presents who accompanied the human being through ordinary life acquire their full significance. The right, the left, the watching, the readiness, the writing, the waiting pen, the pages accumulating quietly while years disappeared. None of it was without destination. The record was always moving towards this encounter, toward the movement when a human being would stand before the life they had lived, not as a memory, not as an autobiography, not as the version polished by regret or softened by time, but as a record. There is something almost breathtaking about the reversal. During life, the human being could not see the scribes, could not see the pages, could not see the ink, could not see the record growing. Only the life was visible. Now that the life has paused, what was invisible becomes visible. A book, their words, their deeds, their choices, their trace. And perhaps that is where the story of the noble scribes finally comes the full circle. We began with an unseen world so vast that the imagination could scarcely contain it. Countless angels, immense responsibilities, revelation, reign, death, the ending of worlds. And from that immeasurable universe, our gaze narrowed to two unseen companions beside one ordinary human being. They followed, they witnessed, they wrote, day after day, page after page, until the life ended and the writing stopped. And what had once been 1,000 disappearing moments becomes something that could be opened, something that could be read, something that transformed a human life to a book of life. And now we return to Ghalib, to the first line. Except it's no longer quite the same line. Because when we first heard Farishton ke Likhe, it was easy to pass over those words as a phrase, an idea. But now, behind those words stands an entire unseen world, a world of beings created for purpose, of duties divided, of records kept, and then two very specific angels, two companions who remain close to a human life like no others, watching it unfold moment by moment, deed by deed, until all that is lived becomes all that is written. Outside this celestial world, Ghalib has been waiting with his complaint. A complaint against the angel's writing that he says has unjustly become the basis of his capture. And Mirza is not pleased. But before we listen to his complaint, there are a few words we should unravel. Because Ghalib has packed an extraordinary amount into some very ordinary looking words. So let's start with Farishton. Literally, it translates to angels, messengers of God, celestial beings. Not Farishta, which would be an angel, one angel, but Farishton, angels. Collection of angels is known as host of angels. One presence becomes many. Scratch. One presence becomes many. One pair of wings becomes an entire unseen population. And after the world we have just visited, perhaps we will never hear that plural quite so casually again. मोहसिन नकवी का बहुत प्यारा शेर, चले जो जिक्र फरिश्तों की परसाई का तो ज़ेर बहस मकाम बशर भी आता है. The approximate translation is, when there starts a mention of the purity of angels, somewhere in the debate, the subject of humankind comes up too. Such is the life of angels and humans. There is an intertwining, a divine intertwining that happens which you cannot tear apart. All right, let's move on to our keyword Naa-Haq. Naa-Haq translates literally to false, unjust, wrongfully. Depending upon where the word is allowed to travel, it symbolizes without rightful claim, without just cause. There are some wrongs that announce themselves loudly, and then there are wrongs that look almost ordinary. Imagine a bird. The sky is open. Its wings are spread. It has already begun to fly. Nothing stands in its way except one small vine that has curled around its ankle accidentally. The vine does not look cruel. It does not need to. The question is simpler. What right does this vine have to hold the bird back? And somewhere inside that question, we begin to approach Naa-Haq. The word carries haq within it. Just, truth, that which is fair, that which has a just claim. And then you couple it with na, no, not without. And suddenly what was rightful has been denied its right. What should have been just has become unjust. What had no rightful claim has exercised one anyway. Naa-Haq, wrongfully, unjustly, without right. And poetry loves this word. Because injustice does not always arrive looking like injustice. There need not be chains and prison and cruelty. Sometimes the entire sky can remain open. The sun can continue shining. The wings can still be strong. And all it takes is one small thing holding on where it had no right to hold. That is Naa-Haq. अकबर अलाहाबादी का ये शेर, जवानी की दुआ लड़कों को नाहक लोग देते हैं, यही लड़के मिटाते हैं जवानी को जवां होकर. The approximate translation is, people needlessly pray that young boys may be blessed with youth. These very boys, once grown young, are the ones who squander youth away. Moving on to the next word, Tahriir. Tahriir literally means the writing. Not merely the act of writing, but what has been actually written. The writing, the inscription, the written record. Now, on an ordinary day, Tahriir is not a difficult word. Something is written, ink meets paper. Words remain behind, and there it is, Tahriir. But words have a habit of behaving differently when they enter the world of poetry. And Tahriir is one of those words. Because outside poetry, Tahriir needs a page. Inside poetry, anything can be a page, everything is a page. A poet can look at water and find a tahrir upon its surface, a writing that trembles with every ripple, visible for a moment and then rearranged in the next. The poet can look across sand and find another tahrir, a line written, waiting for the wind to decide how long it will remain. Look upward and the sky becomes a page. Destiny stretched across it, a tahrir, written before we arrived to read it. And then the lover looks into the eyes of the beloved, and apparently even those are not safe from becoming a manuscript. There too the lover finds a tahrir, a promise, a refusal, a verdict, perhaps an entire destiny, written somewhere between one glance and the next. Poetry performs its quiet acts of alchemy. It does not merely give us new writing, it gives us new places to find writing. Water becomes a page, sand becomes a page, the sky becomes a page, the beloved's eyes become a page. A veil moving in the wind can become a page. And that is what poetry changes. Not the writing, the page. Once we enter its world, paper loses its monopoly. The poet begins finding tahrir on surfaces no qalam has visibly touched. Because inside poetry, anything can be a page, everything is a page. बशीर बद्र का ये शेर, यूं प्यार नहीं छुपता पलकों के झुकाने से, आंखों के लिफाफों में तहरीर चमकती है. Beautiful couplet. The approximate translation is, love cannot be hidden simply by lowering the eyes. From within the envelopes of the eyes, the written message shines through. All right, that takes care of all our keywords. Let's move on into our impression. First line, पकड़े जाते हैं फरिश्तों के लिखे पर नाहक. We are seized unjustly based on the writings of the angels. So far we have been hearing about the writing of the angels as something almost divinely beautiful. A column moves, a deed becomes a line, a life slowly becomes a record. But Ghalib places the ominous gravitas of this writing right at the opening of the Sher. Pakde jaate hain. We are seized. These three words look beyond the beautiful act of writing. They look towards its consequence. They focus on the results of this writing. Ghalib lives in this Sher the day when writing finally travels from the page to its owner, and in doing so brings the deed along with it. Not one, not some, but each and every one of our deeds. Deeds that happened once, one moment, one action, one choice. And then the moment passed, the day continued. The person moved on, the person forgot, but the record did not. And today, that deed with every other one returns with consequence. That is the finality inside Pakde Jaate hain. This is not merely being caught. It is being held to account for everything you did that seemingly disappeared, but never disappeared. The deed belonged to the past. The writing does not. राहत इंदौरी का ये शेर, ये मैं कदा है, वो मस्जिद है, वो है बुत खाना, कहीं भी जाओ फरिश्ते हिसाब रखते हैं. The approximate translation is, here is the tavern, there the mosque, and there the temple of idols. Wherever you may go, the angels are keeping account. So that takes care of पकड़े जाते हैं. Let's move on to फरिश्तों के लिखे पर. Now this is no ordinary writing. Let's start right there. This writing is not memory. It's not rumor. Not another person's recollection. Not even our own version that we carry inside our heads. This writing is the record that is made moment by moment, deed by deed, until a life that once existed in time exists also in writing. The afternoon is gone, the room is gone, the witnesses are gone, and still they remain in a written line. And when that line becomes the basis of judgment, its consequences do not end. This reach beyond time of accountability and of consequence is what give Ghalib's first line its extraordinary weight. This Pakde Jaate hain is not about being caught for an evening deed or a morning error in judgment. This is being held to account, held in captivity on the strength of a record whose consequences reach even beyond the life it has recorded. Maharaja Sir Kishan Prasad Shad का ये शेर, लिखे हुए हैं वो सब हाथ से फरिश्तों के, मेरे गुनाहों का क्यों कर कहूँ हिसाब नहीं. The approximate translation is, they are all written down by the hands of angels themselves. How then can I say there is no account of my sins? After all that weight, all that permanence of that celestial record, Ghalib in the first line goes on to place one small word at the end of the line. Naa-Haq, unjustly. And with that one word, the accused has now spoken. Ghalib does not deny the existence of angels. He does not deny that they write. He does not deny that there is a record. He objects to the legitimacy of it all. अबीद आलमी का ये शेर, जब कहा मैंने कुछ हिसाब तो दें, क्यों फरिश्तों की झुक गई आंखें. The approximate translation is, when I said, then give me some account of it, why did the angels lower their eyes? Naa-Haq, this is not fair, this is not right. You have no right to hold me this way. This is where we begin to hear the unmistakable voice of Mirza Ghalib. Faced with the terrifying permanence of a celestial record, Ghalib does not shrink back. In fact, he springs forward and objects. And with that objection, Ghalib initiates a case like none other. So, that takes care of the first line, पकड़े जाते हैं फरिश्तों के लिखे पर ना-हक. Let's move on to our second line. आदमी कोई हमारा दम-ए-तहरीर भी था. Was there even a person from our side at the time of these writings? Ghalib created a door with one small word in the first line, Na-Haq, unjustly. Now, in the second line, we will watch him walk through that door. And perhaps in a way only Ghalib can. Because this is no ordinary room, right? This is the celestial court. Divine authority presides over it. The records are external. The evidence is written by angelic hands. The charges carry consequences that reach beyond a lifetime. And it is into this celestial court that Ghalib walks in, alone, undaunted, unflustered, unintimidated, ready to be the offender, the accused, and apparently his own defense counsel. Mirza has arrived. And with that nonchalant, matter-of-fact, surgical precision we know so well and spend hours interpreting, one can almost hear Ghalib say, अच्छा जी, तो आपके angels, आपकी writings, आपके रिकॉर्ड्स. चलिए तो फिर आपसे ही बात शुरू करते हैं. Explain to me the legitimacy and transparency of the process by which आपके angels ने आपके लिए आपकी writing record की. Were both sides represented equally? Who all were there to testify to this act? Who all were there to witness this act? Who represented whom? Because from what I can see, it was your people writing, your people recording, your people testifying, your people witnessing. हमारा आदमी कहाँ था? Right? Where was our man? And with that one question, Ghalib does something wonderfully Ghalib. He puts the evidence gathering process on trial. Where was ours? You had your account of what happened. Where was our account? Your observation, your testimony, your evidence, your version. Where was ours? And suddenly the celestial proceeding begins to look strangely lopsided. Imagine the scales of justice. One side is ready, a pan hangs from it, the record is placed upon it. Everything required for that side to make its case is present. And then we look across to the other side. The weighing scale beam is present. The place where another pan should hang is there, but the pan itself is missing. Not light, not empty. Pan is missing. There was nowhere to place our writing, our testimony, our account, our version of what happened. Says Ghalib, looking at the missing pan on the other side. Admi koi hamara. And perhaps that is the audacity in those three words. Ghalib does not question the presence of what was written. He questions the absence of what was never written. The absence of counter narratives, counter records that might have said, "एक मिनट, बात सिर्फ इतनी नहीं थी." There was context, there was intention to what happened. And notice, Ghalib never actually says nobody was there. He asks, "Admi koi hamara?" Leads the celestial court to supply the answer. And of course, the answer is nobody. And now his Naa-Haq begins to acquire a deeper gravitas. The scale was not tilted against him. The scale was never installed for him. मुबाशिर अली जैदी का ये शेर, सरजद हुई थी नशे में हमसे भी नेकियां, सरजद हुई थी नशे में हमसे भी नेकियां, वो दफ्तरे हिसाब फरिश्ते से खो गया. The approximate translation is, even we committed a few good deeds while intoxicated. Alas, the angel seems to have lost that book of accounts. Counter narratives, right? Ghalib is not questioning what is written. He is questioning the absence of opportunity for a counter narrative. So that takes care of Admi Koi Hamara Bhi. Moving on to Dam-e-Tahriir Bhi Tha. Now, on the surface, Dam-e-Tahriir sounds as though it is about writing, right? Tahrir. But it is not. Dam-e-Tahriir is about a moment. Dam, the instant, the breath, the precise moment when the writing was being written. And look at how exact Ghalib's challenge has now become. He is no longer asking generally who was there. He takes the entire celestial proceeding and reduces it to one instance. The deed happens, the column starts moving, the ink descends, the deed starts transforming into a record. That moment, who was there? Not before, not after. Tell me, Dam-e-Tahriir, at the moment of writing, who from my side witnessed the deed become the record? That is Ghalib's question. Who was there to interrupt from my side and say, "एक मिनट, ये ऐसे नहीं हुआ था," or perhaps ऐसे हुआ था मगर पूरी बात ये है. Ghalib's question is almost forensic, asking not merely about the fairness of the evidence, but about the integrity of its making. Tahrir, as we covered in keywords, takes on completely different persona in poetry. In Ghalib's Sher today, Tahrir is not about writing. It is about a moment. It is about a presence. It is about an absence. And Ghalib, in his unmistakable style, does not state the absence. He makes the absence answer for itself. At that moment of recording the deed, it seems everyone was present except Hamara Admi. And with that, Ghalib rests his case. So, that takes care of the second line, Admi koi hamara Dam-e-Tahriir bhi tha. Was there even a person from our side at the time of these writings? Now, as always, let's take a few moments to step back and look at the couplet in totality. पकड़े जाते हैं फरिश्तों के लिखे पर नाहक, आदमी कोई हमारा दमे-तहरीर भी था. So, by the time the second line ended, Ghalib had rested his case with a question that overturned the legitimacy and authenticity of the evidence gathering process. Not the evidence, evidence gathering process. Except the Sher has not rested its case yet. The Sher doth protest. And the protest is against an irony that should perhaps belong only to Ghalib the Maestro. Think about the man who has just spent an entire Sher arguing against writing. Not just any writing of angels themselves, writing that records him, writing that becomes evidence against him and ultimately catches him. Ghalib the poet, and yes, that description is inadequate, because this is not merely someone who writes poetry, right? This is Ghalib, a poet before whom words seem almost to bow. He does not merely arrange language, he stretches it, turns it, breaks it open, makes one word contain several worlds. He takes familiar words and returns them to us altered, sometimes newly born, sometimes carrying meanings we did not know they possessed. Ghalib does not merely write words, he alchemizes them. Words are his material, his instrument, his territory, his power. This is the same Ghalib who in the very first ghazal of his Divan writes, आ गही दामे शनीदन जिस कदर चाहे बिछाए मुद्दा अनका है अपने आलमे तहरीर का. The approximate translation is, let understanding spread its net of hearing as far as it wishes. The thing it seeks in my Alam-e-Tahriir, my world of writing, is Anka, the elusive bird, sought, imagined, pursued, but never caught. And then to witness what has caught him in this Sher. Not chains, not weapons, not even the deeds themselves. Words, written words, granted written words by angels, but words nevertheless. Therein lies the irony. The puppeteer of words caught by words. आगे ही दामे शुनीदन जिस कदर चाहे बिछाए मुद्दा अनका है अपने आलमे तहरीर का. In that Sher, a Tahrir written by Ghalib, caught by none. And in today's Sher, another Tahrir, another act of capture, except this time the writing does not belong to Ghalib. It belongs to the angels. And suddenly the direction of capture has reversed. Instead of everyone trying to catch Ghalib's writing and failing to do so, in our couplet today, the angel's writing catches Ghalib. Oh Mirza, your Alam-e-Tahriir could escape every net. Your meaning could remain elusive. Your words could refuse capture. But today, you have encountered a text you did not author. A text whose metaphors you cannot rearrange, whose ambiguity you cannot inhabit, whose grammar you cannot overturn, whose words you cannot alchemize. Because for once you are not holding the kalam, someone else's. The poet wrote words, the angels wrote the poet. And words, it seems, finally caught up with their master. All right, so that brings us to the end of पकड़े जाते हैं फरिश्तों के लिखे पर नाहक, आदमी कोई हमारा दमे तहरीर भी था. The approximate translation: we are seized unjustly based on the writings of the angels. Was there even a person from our side at the time of these writings? We genuinely hoped you enjoyed the episode and the opportunity it gave us to deep dive into the world of angels. That was an extraordinary experience for us. We hope it was the same for you. As always, we'll be very keen to hear your feedback and your comments. Now, for the new viewers, a strong recommendation to access the episode Introduction to DGMZ, simply because it will give you a good insight into the motivation and inspiration behind this podcast. For our regular viewers, whenever you have time, go to the homepage of the channel, surf it, multiple playlists segregated by topics, themes, and ghazals. Pick an episode that interests you. If you haven't joined us on Facebook and Instagram, we encourage you to join us there. Help us build a community there. Now, allow me to go ahead and close this episode by sending a lot of love and lot of light to all you dear viewers, and thanks for watching.